Yes, so on this solemn occasion of the International Day of Victims of Enforced Disappearances, I bring you greetings from the Southern Cameroon's Alliance and from our people who continue to endure untold suffering under the weight of dictatorship, silence, and impunity. Enforced disappearances in Cameroon are not an accident of history. They are the deliberate weapon of a regime that has for decades chosen fear over freedom and violence over dialogue. This is not only targeted towards Southern Cameroonians and Ambazonians, even Francophones are victims every day. Take the case of the Bepanda Nine. 9 young men arrested in Douala in January 2001 by the so-called Commandement Opérationnel. Their crime was alleged petty theft, but their real crime was being poor, vulnerable, and expendable. To this day, their bodies have never been returned to their families to give them closure. Professor Patrice Nganan also made mention of Captain Gerandi Mbara, an army officer accused of involvement in the 1982 coup attempt. For years, he lived in exile, only to disappear after reports of abduction in 2014, allegedly with the complicity of foreign intelligence services. His whereabouts remain unknown, but we suspect that he was killed. We also recall, as I think we all do, the leaders of the Southern Cameroon's liberation movement who were abducted from Nigeria in January 2018 and illegally transferred to Cameroon. I barely escaped that one. And for months, they were held incommunicado, their families not knowing if they were alive or dead. They managed to escape the fate reserved for Captain Gerandi, which was the fate initially planned by the regime. And we cannot forget the various activists who have been arrested and disappeared into the regime's prisons. Journalists like T. Conrad, Penn Terence, Mancho BBC, who paid the price for daring to stand for truth. Each of these names represents hundreds more unnamed villagers picked up in the night by the regime's military, opposition activists taken without warrants, ordinary Cameroonians swallowed into the dark corridors of police cells, military camps, and secret detention centers. It is even worse when you are a no-name, when your name is not Professor Patrice Nganan, a professor at the University of New York, American citizen known globally, when you have no reputation, no position, and no family able to raise the alarm, then you are doomed. And I know this from personal experience. In 1994, during the All Anglophone Conference in Bamenda, I was arrested at the T-Junction. From that moment, I vanished. My family searched from police station to police station, begging for information, but no one could tell them where I was because nobody knew. All they knew was that I had been arrested. For days, I disappeared, swallowed by the system. For the time I spent in detention, there was no investigation, no charge, no questions asked, just pure impunity. All this can happen to you when you are a person of high repute or with powerful connections. But when you are not, you disappear and nothing happens. No one is held accountable. In our case, as soon as they threw us in the back of the military truck, the nightmare began. They did not wait. With the butts of their guns, they pounded us, blow after blow, as if we were no longer human. Young recruits, straight out of Kutaba, unleashed on us with fury. They beat us all the way until we reached upstation. Every strike announcing that we had crossed into a world without mercy. What many do not know is this. They forced us into what they call the balançoire, hands pressed to the wall, bodies twisted unnaturally while they beat the soles of your feet until every nerve screams in agony. With each lash, they forced us to shout, AAC Oye, AACOA mocking us, turning our pain into their theater of humiliation. And when they grew tired, they simply climbed into their beds and snored, as if nothing had happened. But the cycle did not end there. As we sat there licking our wounds, a fresh truckload would arrive and the ordeal would begin all over again. Ah, ils sont là, hein? Wave after wave, each new group determined to prove they were more brutal than the last. Finally, they made us crawl on our knees, our hands behind our heads, towards the detention cells. Every step was another ritual of degradation. As we passed into another room, a new circle of torment awaited us. Later, we learned that these were not regular soldiers. These were regular soldiers. They were gendarmerie officers themselves who had fallen into indiscipline and had been condemned to detention. They asked us to march on our knees as they beat us until we stumbled forward and hurled ourselves into the darkness of the cells to avoid the last lash. And then began the long silence of arbitrary detention. No questions asked, no trial, no judgment, no justice, just the endless void of survival, whispering prayers that somehow your family would hear of you and that they would find a way to ransom you back from this abyss. That was my experience in 1994, and that is what it means to disappear. The days when nobody knows where you are or what has happened to you. But think of those who are not so lucky. Think of the young boys abducted by the Bataillon d'Intervention Rapide, the BIR, killed and their bodies thrown into rivers. Typical example are those of the boys who over a certain period were abducted in and around Chomba, killed and then regularly disposed into the Naka River in Bali. One man who dared to report these atrocities was himself abducted and detained for months in Kondengi because he had dared to put out an audio in Mungaka reporting the regular activities of the BIR not far from his house by the river. This is the cruel reality of disappearances in Cameroon. The nameless often vanish without a trace, leaving no record, no advocacy, no justice. As the Southern Cameroon's alliance, we state clearly, enforced disappearance is a crime against humanity. It is not just the removal of an individual. It is the erasure of dignity, the silencing of voices, and the intimidation of entire communities. The gentleman who reported the activities of Naka was punished for being a whistleblower, instead of being commended and compensated. That is the Cameroon of Paul Biya we have all been victims of, one way or the other, either directly or through relatives, friends, or acquaintances. That is why no one can afford to sit on the side and do nothing. We are all invited to act before our turn comes up. We reject any attempt to normalize disappearances, whether carried out by a state agent or by armed groups. But the greatest responsibility lies with the state of Cameroon, which has institutionalized these practices, shielded perpetrators, and refused transparency. We therefore recommend the following to our people. To document and remember, we must build archives of memory. Every name, every case must be recorded, especially the no names who would otherwise vanish twice. Once from life being taken away by the regime, and then the second time being erased from memory and from history. We need to carry out international action, and I think some of the speakers have spoken about it. Lloyd and so on have made mention for us for the call to the UN for targeted sanctions and accountability before international justice. And I hope that Kawala is going to talk to that just now. Cameroon cannot be left to police itself. Unity of political actors, whether federalists, independentists, or civil society, must unite around one irreducible demand. No political settlement is complete until the disappeared are accounted for and prisoners of conscience are freed. Justice for the disappeared must be at the center of this transition. Through truth-telling, reparations, and guarantees of non-repetition. For immediate action, we recommend the Release Them campaign. Develop a public repository where people can register names of their lost ones who have disappeared at the hands of the regime, And as I listen to Remy and Eileen, I'm thinking that there is already work that has started. Perhaps there is no need to reinvent the wheel, but rather build on what has already started. Most of all, we need to record the names of accounting officers, the commandant de brigade, the police commissioner, the divisional officer, the governor, and whosoever is responsible for the district of a crime must be held responsible and accountable for that crime. We need to start keeping records and documenting for the time when we have to act on these crimes. Brothers and sisters, dear comrades, disappearance is meant to make people invisible. By speaking their names, from the Bepanda 9, Captain Gerandim Bara, the Nera 10, and the nameless victims of Bali, of Bamenda, of Moyoka, we can make them visible again. So we should do our very best to make sure that their memories don't go in vain. Never again should families be left in the darkness, not knowing where their dear loved ones have gone to. So I thank you very much. Don't finish.